We are live. I'm just going live from my phone, as I often do from my phone. I almost never use my laptop except when I'm doing proper podcast interviews. I wanted to look at and comment on some things in relation to the political situation in America, specifically with the Democratic Party infighting, the you could basically call it a war of sorts between Biden loyalists and anti-loyalists, I'll call them. We're going to go to a friend of mine's profile, PvP, Principles Before Politics. Good follow, by the way. And we're going to look at, actually, you know what? Let's go to me. We'll go to him via me. So, because I replied to him recently. Here we go. All right. So we've both been commenting, him more than me, because his whole thing is, politics, political discourse. Obviously, mine is more mixed. You'll be seeing more videos pop up on the channel, lives and otherwise, trying to straddle that line. One of my top videos, not in terms of popularity or likes, but most just in terms of sort of temporal recentness, is me excerpting the recording after the fact of a Twitter space where I got mau-maued for daring to say unorthodox, but ultimately I would say highly defensible and true things about the state of play for people, specifically people who look like me, African Americans, blacks in America, 2024, as well as just sort of questioning Democratic Party or liberal or progressive orthodoxies around diversity, equity, and inclusion, race, etc. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about a different sort of race, talking about the presidential race and Democratic Party, the nomination, specifically our Democratic Party president, Joe Biden, and the idea that he should step down, step aside, something that I have commented on, I would say fairly principledly, if that's a word, with principled opinions and discourse, articulating what I think is the truth from the fiction about what the actual options are here and what the pragmatic realities are here. But notably, the situation with the sort of skirmishes in this war, we'll call it, or this civil war, infighting. I mean, obviously, it's kind of dramatic language, but it really is a big deal because what we're looking at here, and let's go to the tweet from Ezra Klein. Let's go to his New York Times article, which is pay-gated. The failing New York Times. They won't let you read their articles for free. There's a way around that, but for our purposes, I've already read it. I won't go with the whole black flag, skull and crossbones ways as to how you can read it for free. Maybe you hit me up in the DMs or whatever if you really want the inside scoop on that one. But the basic idea he articulates here is the Democrats have a serious problem with Joe Biden, with his age, and with public loss of confidence in Joe Biden because of his age. And their responses to this are unsatisfactory, to say the least. What I had long been articulating, what I still would stand on, again, on principle, is this basic read of reality and the lay of the land. The Democratic Party primary process exists, or rather, and I say this not, I'll just say it, existed, meaning there was a window to primary the sitting president and replace him with another person as the nominee via winning more delegates in those various primary races and then bringing those delegate totals to bear in the upcoming, still hasn't happened yet, Democratic Party. Uh, Democratic Party. I'm actually literally Googling this as we go. Democratic Party National Convention. Excuse me. And there we go. This will be in August 19 to 22 of this year. This live is going, now. So July 11th. So this will be over a month from now that this convention will happen. And what people have been saying about this convention and the sort of myths and myth making that have been offered that I have been pushing back on hard as hell, go along the lines of, oh yeah, so even though the primaries already happened and Joe Biden got a overwhelming number of the delegates, more than is needed to secure the nomination by rights, we can just totally ignore that and have an open or contested or brokered convention and figure out something else and pick somebody else as the nominee, which is not real. All right, I'm going to say this affirmatively. It's not real. Okay, I'll say that again really quickly. It's not fucking real. All right, forgive my language, but that needs to be emphasized. Okay. And this is something that people don't like to hear. This is something that, especially now, as this, sort of infighting we're seeing is happening, people are very unhappy about. And I understand that to the extent that it is understandable or comprehensible. But what I would say, in turn, is y'all, and I've said this before, this is my recriminations, this is my kind of, you made your bed, now lie in it. Y'all should have done something when you had the chance, right? I can point to a number of alternatives, counterfactuals. I mean, most notably, and the lessons from this still reverberate and seem to not be being learned or understood properly today. 1968 Democratic presidential primaries, right? And then we will compare, by the way, to the 2024 Democratic primaries. That is not what I want. Democratic, to the 2024 Democratic primaries. One of the biggest problems here is, and you can see I'm not great at multitasking while I'm talking and then typing and everything else, but one of the biggest problems here is people not wanting to face reality. Do you know, it's estimated delegate count, do you know how many delegates are required to win, to secure, to have certified? Because even saying win in this context, in the context of July 11th, right, after the primaries have already concluded, they concluded in June, to secure, to ratify one's nomination. Do you know what's required? Let's find out. What is the required number of delegates to secure the nomination? Let's go back to the convention. Okay. Required number of delegates, 1,886 from pledged delegates only. So estimates, right? Estimates. Joe Biden has currently 3,905. Let's do some quick math. And in fact, don't even trust me, right? We're literally going to put this into the calculator. Divided by 2. So I'm no mathematician, but my computer is. He has literally more than double the required minimum in order to secure the nomination, to have it certified at the convention. Okay? Now that I've belabored that point, what are we actually looking at here? We're looking at a situation where people who didn't really have any meaningful interest in primarying presidents, in repeating quote unquote the mistakes, because that's the way some people view it, the mistakes of 68, etc. We're looking at a situation where these people want now to say, well, uh, bad debate, bad optics, old guy, stuff like, you know, stuff to some extent we already knew before the actual debate happened. Um, Pull the ripcord, find some way to get out of this, some mechanistic way to get out of this, which again is largely, not entirely, all right, I'll throw some people up on in a minute, largely, not entirely, unreal. Okay. My position, and some of this again is me articulating reality. So there's like, I often say there's a difference between um, commenting or arguing even at the fact layer versus commenting or arguing at the opinion layer. And I'm just going to find like some easy breezy. Don't do that. Come on now. Ocean. There we go. Ocean waves. Let's do that. Ocean waves. Because I just literally want to have something. There we go. And it's a nice background. Maybe that's a little loud coming through. I'm not sure how well you can hear that. I might lower the volume. But I just want to have something because people are like, it gets boring when you just keep your window on nothing or just a block of text. So okay, there you go. For you lovely people that have a short attention span or want visuals, here you've got visuals and modulating text. That's not maybe in the right word, but for lack of a better one. Okay, moving right along. Hopefully, in all likelihood, and in all likelihood, probably not. I don't want to get copyright struck. So whatever this is can even be copyrighted. That is the right term, not copywritten, because it's right as in RIGHT, not right as in WRIT. Anyway, fact layer, fact claims. Fact claim number 1. The process for determining the presidential nominee exists, was on the table, was actionable all the way up until, I'm going to say, as late as March of 2024, this year. And most of the people were united, most of the Democrats specifically, were united in not having a very big interest in that process, right? And so when people of those ilk now, in this what we might call civil war, the Biden anti-loyalists are cropping up saying, well, I changed my mind. You're a child. You don't get to, let's put, like, use an analogy. Analogies often, I like to use analogies. They make things clear. You're having a catered event. If anybody knows anything about events and hospitality, I work in events, by the way. It's technically one of my, side gigs, day jobs, whatever, to pay the bills. If you know anything on events, catered events, you make your orders and requests for the food well in advance of the actual day of, and the caterers make, like, it's basically the exact opposite of make to order. It's prepared in advance, or ordered in advance, and then made to specifications, prepped and made to specifications, with prep time, with careful planning, and crucially, without last minute, in general, last minute modifications. Obviously, there is some room to move for some modifications, and depending on what you ordered and where and how, all these things. But the broad strokes of my analogy are: if you're going to order, for example, a wedding cake or a whole wedding buffet, you don't get to then say on the day, I changed my mind about like having a carrot cake and buffalo wings. Now I want a red velvet cake and pizza. I mean, pizza is actually relatively easy to whip up on the fly, but just for the sake of argument, go with me. Let's just say, like, I know I want. I want f- shellfish, right? I want lobster, right? As opposed to barbecue. I want lobster as opposed to barbecue, and I want a red velvet cake as opposed to a carrot cake. Get fucked, you retard. Again, excuse my French, but this language is used for emphasis. You're a child. That's not how this works. So that's the way I'm looking at people who want to change, mechanistically change out Biden as an option at the Democratic primary, or sorry, at the Democratic convention, when they had zero interest in the primary. No, you're gonna stick with your carrot cake and your barbecue. Now, as far as like limited modifications, right? You want to add a pizza on? Okay, let's add a pizza on, right? You want to change something about the way the cake will look, not the actual innards of it, maybe how it's frosted, or maybe like the cake topper, some decorations. Sure. All right. And so we have the Biden-Harris, ticket, the Biden-Harris campaign. What can you do with that? That would kind of compromise on some of these issues. And I was less open to this, not again for process reasons, because this was always technically a process possibility, but more so because our sitting president himself, Joe Biden, said this was not an option. But increasingly, it seems like he might get bullied into it regardless. The sitting president can step aside, retire, whatever term you want to use. And there's differences between those terms, to be clear. But for the sake of argument, we'll simplify everything and just say it's all going in the same direction. And we can have Vice President Kamala Harris become sitting President Kamala Harris. And that's an important distinction there. Sitting President Kamala Harris, as well as top of ticket presidential nominee Kamala Harris, ratified at the convention. And crucially, all of this would need to happen before the convention. After the convention, y'all are, and I say y'all, it's Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. Just, again, statement of fact, I'm not. I have voted with the Democrats. I have voted for Democratic candidates in the past. I've never really voted for a presidential Republican. I have voted for presidential non-Democrats, non-Republicans, particularly in 2016. But anyway, I'm not a Democrat. But still, y'all are fucked straight, like locked in and fucked, because I will admit, I don't think Biden is a winning candidate. I would agree with the non-loyalists on that point. You're straight fucked if you don't do something before the convention, right? That's been what is like driving all these alarm bells. It's like the convention is really the last chance to quote unquote do something. Okay, fair enough. And also assuming you do something better, which is again why you should have done something with the primaries. I'm going to say more than anything, a lot of the people who want to do something now and didn't want to do something then, they kind of deserve to lose at this point. Like, I would be more than happy. You might say, "Oh my God, what about Trump? Affect our democracy." I'm not a Trump fan. I'm not a Trump voter. I hope he loses. But if you want to be real with me, man, if there's a situation where Biden and Trump could lose, that is the best of all possible worlds. That is the best of all possible worlds. If there was a situation where Biden and Trump could both lose, fuck yeah, I'm all in. And that's not just a burn it down. It's not just a, I hated duopoly. That's not just anything. That is principally a commentary on the fact that neither one of these candidates, neither one of these campaigns and parties deserves to win in their current formations. They don't. They do not. I'll say that affirmatively. In the case of the Democrats, they have a bad candidate. They knew this is crucial, and people will disagree on this one. I will say some of this is fact claims we could make. There's evidence to point to fact claims about what people knew and when they knew it. Some of this is conjecture. Some of this is opinion. So, reasonable minds can differ about some of this, but I'll just say affirmatively, for the sake of argument, they knew that he was a bad candidate, and they just dismissed that as an issue. They knew that he was old. That's objectively true that he was old. Like what that implies, what that means about him knowing that he was old is sure. Again, reasonable minds can differ about the implications there, but they literally knew that he was old. He's literally the oldest living president we've ever had. And to be fair, Trump is the second oldest. So again, that I've often said that whole issue, cuts both ways. They knew this, and they were like, "Man, it's not a big deal." Until the debate, in which case, because the whole sort of first mover problem of who's going to call a spade and tell the truth about his age was alleviated because we could all see live and in living color, with no editing or claims of cheap fakes, that Biden is really fucking old and arguably incompetent. Okay. They deserve to lose in the current Constitution. But again, for the interest of the Democratic Party, for the interest of the ticket, for the interest of the country, let's see what the option would be for a solution, right? For an alternative. Okay. Again, it is not randomly changing out Joe Biden for somebody else. Somebody else who's not currently in government, let's say, not currently in the executive branch, right? And not currently in the line of succession. You know where I'm going with this. That is off the table. Affirmatively, that is off the table. There's a number of reasons why, including people talk about, the war chest of the Biden-Harris campaign finance, etc. It's just not real. But if Joe Biden were to, quote unquote, of his own volition, but really getting bullied into it by his anti-loyalists and dissenters in his own party, ultimately to decide to retire. And we could even, this is a crucial thing I've been talking about, outside of medical emergency, Joe Biden will not retire. He said as much. I believe it when he says it. I believe that he has a bunch of, again, loyalists, including his family, around him who will defend him and push back against the anti-loyalists, such that he will stay in power, stay in the presidency, and stay as the nominee. And I do believe that there's precedent for this. People talk about precedent. I've gone back and forth with PPP, Principles Before Politics, about precedent, how like we're in uncharted waters. Forgive the pun because of the visual and the audio that you see on your screen right now. We're in uncharted waters. We are and we aren't. Precedent for a senile, infirm, historically old president whose friends and family and cabinet are kind of carrying him across the finish line of his current term and poo-pooing any talk of invoking the 25th, or that's the 25th Amendment, which would, take him out of office, or replacing him with the vice president, or retiring in office, or any of these other things. And crucially, that was an election year, but that was not a re-election year. That was during the person I'm talking about, of course, is Reagan in '88. That was not a re-election year. That was the final year of his second term. So it's different, but still. His vice president was running for the nomination, and then the election after winning the nomination, and he ultimately did win the election. So this is going to sound like here's a phrase I would never have said, but shout out to George H.W. Bush, the more competent of the Bush family, the patriarch. But anyway, I'm gonna get a sip of water. So, all these forces, right? combine to show that there is precedent for all these things. The precedent does not show what some people wanted to show, and that's why I think a lot of people like to poo-poo it. Like, I'm like, there's precedent for all this stuff if you just like look at it and are willing to admit what it tells you, which is not what you want to hear, but is still like observable and useful for history and the present day. So the precedent with a sitting president who is senile, dealing with mental issues, notably Ronald Reagan again, besides being historically old and dealing with mental issues, he specifically was diagnosed with dementia in 1994. So, multiple years after he was already out of office, officially, but reports have come out since implying or explicitly saying that, well, what they knew then is kind of maybe there was this concerted cabal shadow cabinet at the time of '88, if not earlier, that considered invoking the 25th but decided against it for reasons of respectability and other things, that these people were working together to run the government, including his wife, Nancy, by the way, and not his vice president, H.W. There's conflicting reports about what even H.W. knew and whether or not he was being deliberately kept out of the loop, which, I'll just say it, it's fucked up, right? But of course, his incentives in that area would not be in line with the loyalists per se, because his incentives would be, hey, maybe this guy who we all have concerns about should step down and I should become president, especially if I'm going to become president anyway by running for and winning election. So, Kamala Harris, right? Here, you all knew where this is going. If the Biden loyalists, including his family, including but not limited to his family, don't win out in this little civil war, and Biden is ultimately bullied into early retirement, and to call it early already is kind of a funny way of putting it, but for the sake of argument, in the twilight of his first presidential term during a campaign for re-election, retiring, right, it would be considered early retirement for the sake of argument. Okay. What happens? Well, the path forward within that, again, I've said before, I don't think this is the most likely option. I still would not bet in favor of it, but I'm saying it's become more real now than I felt it was even a week ago, let alone 2. I did a Twitter space on this. The path forward for this is essentially Biden would retire, and now the actual like verbiage and mechanics of this may vary, but I would say principally and crucially it has to be something more along the lines, and I'll get to that in a second. Firstly, he will retire. Just broad strokes, like bullet points. He retires, and we'll explain what retires means in this context, but he retires. Vice President Kamala Harris becomes sitting acting president Kamala Harris, as well as top ticket nominee, presidential nominee Kamala Harris. And this all has to happen before the convention. None of this works after the convention. None of it. Literally none of it. But especially the nomination, the switching of the top of ticket nominee, in my opinion. She becomes the sitting president and the nominee, certified at the convention, because the way the delegates work, by the way, I can explain this. I'll do this minor digression. If the option that is available and that they were assigned to if the option that they're assigned to is no longer available, the delegates are not only allowed but required to pick somebody else. They don't just fall off, so to speak, right? You don't just throw out all those quote unquote votes or assignments. So those almost 4,000 delegates would then be up for grabs, and most likely they would just go to the person who is most suited, in the line of succession. The sitting president, because this, again, crucially, the way this would work is Biden retires, Kamala becomes the sitting president in office. We've had precedent for vice presidents becoming the presidents because the sitting president was removed for various reasons. Most famously and most notably in terms of someone being removed while they were alive, with Gerald Ford replacing Nixon. Crucially and interestingly, talking about the Nixon administration, I'm not a crook. Nixon's administration. I'm going to just call a spade a spade. Whatever your thoughts on Nixon, if you're a fan, and I have Republicans who are viewers, fans, friends of mine. I have Nixon fans, right, in my community. Whatever your thoughts of Nixon in terms of policy, I think it's a fair thing we can say. I can say he was corrupt. His administration was corrupt, and it was in fact so corrupt that he had. I'm going to actually quickly just Google this, but I'm pretty confident my history here. He had not one, but two vice presidents who were both functionally untenable as replacements for him for the presidency. His first vice president, let's go here. His first vice president was, let me go, Nixon. Here we go. First vice president was Spiro Agnew, right? Who was, who had to resign because of corruption scandal. Okay, so I sort of had it wrong. All right. His first vice president was Spiro Agnew. His second vice president was Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was formerly the Speaker of the House. So the way it worked was that Gerald Ford took over for Spiro Agnew as vice president. And then relatively, this is important, right? Check this out. President of the United States replaced by, let's go down, right? President of the United States replaced by Gerald Ford. Doesn't actually say a date, but I've got the deets via Wikipedia. There we go, 74. So check this out. Spiro Agnew until 73, October 73, relatively big vacancy. Then a few months, and then Gerald Ford from 73 to 74. Again, going back, August of 74. The ins and outs of how Gerald Ford got to be vice president are complicated. A huge digression we won't even go into. But basically, Spiro Agnew was corrupt. He had to resign for a corruption scandal. He was replaced as vice president. Gerald Ford became vice president, and Gerald Ford ultimately became president when Nixon was replaced. And I believe, as I understand it, part of the background of this was that Nixon himself was already facing some heat around issues of corruption in his administration during the time that Spiro was replaced and Gerald Ford came in. So there was already, if not talk of like straight up impeaching Nixon and replacing him, then certainly talk of like this pick you have for VP needs to be like solid as hell. Like it's not just this thing when we talk about it sometimes in politics. Like the VP is just kind of in a ceremonial honorary like dope position. No, this can't be a dope. This has to be like a legit like guy, because your last VP was corrupt and you're a little shady, Nixon. So like make sure you pick a solid guy. Anyway, so the last time we had a vice president replace a sitting president without a death or other medical issue was Gerald Ford for Nixon. Kamala Harris replacing Joe Biden, or Joe Biden is still alive, right, would be a complicated thing in of itself. So what did I go over? I went over, yeah. So Joe Biden retires. Kamala Harris takes over. Kamala Harris becomes the nominee. Kamala Harris continues as top of ticket, acts as president and runs for president while acting as president. Okay. And then also presumably a nominee is chosen before, during the convention. A vice presidential pick is chosen before, during the convention, and also ratified at the convention. Okay. All right. The actual ins and outs of the replacement. All right. Okay. This is another important thing. How long have we been going, by the way? 22 minutes. Okay. I'm gonna try and finish this up at it before 30 because I don't want to be here that long, and I'm sure as much as some of my people might love me, like me, you're not really trying to hang out with me for that long either, especially for this little like sort of quickie live. All right. And this is an optics thing. This is a like almost Machiavellian, politics as theater, politics as to use the professional wrestling term as a work, as a performance. You have to you have to sell this. You have to sell Joe Biden retiring, but make it look less like, yeah, I'm just quitting, right? Make it look less like LBJ in '68. Again, that's the other like notable example of precedent in this area. Lyndon Baines Johnson, there was a whole movement around him, around his presidency. It's called the Dump Johnson movement. And that's Dump, D-U-M-P, Dump Johnson movement. And they were organized, they were principled, they were smart. Just comparing them to like all the, I'm going to say it, chicken shits in the DNC right now, the Democratic establishment more broadly, it's like night and day. It's like, oh my God, you guys aren't even like fit to shine these people's shoes with your spit. Like, you're just so pathetic by comparison. But anyway, that recriminations aside, I've been recriminating the hell out of the Democrats already. They got Johnson to basically not run for president, to not run for re-election. And he said as much in March of that year, in March of '68, which led to a like legit primary where there are multiple contenders and then a contested convention, which ultimately led to the vice president getting the nomination anyway, despite the fact that the vice president was not the popular consensus pick during the primaries and prior to the actual convention itself. And one could say that the way that all played out was one of the reasons why contested conventions are so, one of many reasons why contested conventions are so in ill repute. Okay. And just aren't done anymore. Okay. So, you have to sell the retirement, but not as a retirement. You have to sell it kind of like a medical emergency. I've been saying before, outside of medical emergency, this isn't going to happen, right? So, medical emergency. You can do this. You can do this with, Joe and his family. You can do this with his personal physician. I don't have to find his name, but I will. President, Dr. Okay, Kevin O'Connor. This is relevant. You can do this with all these people together and basically sell the idea of, okay, we have been looking at all the. So you can't even say we have been looking. I mean, you kind of can, but like you have to, and the actual like exactitude of how this needs to be articulated, I won't even go into verbatim because like how could I? And it's like they're not looking at me, but like this has to be articulated in such a way where, for reasons of respectability among a number of other reasons, it can't just be I quit. It can't just be I retire, because again, the window for that has passed. The ship on that has sailed, especially since Joe Biden has been making, and his team has been making such vocal comments saying, I won't quit, I won't retire. So it has to be like, he said, it's outside of an act of God, I won't retire. Okay. It has to be something like, well, we had that act of God, or, I had a medical scare, there's a reason, so I am retiring, effective immediately. Kamala Harris is the sitting president and the nominee, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That happens, right? Because that would be the only way forward for the Biden anti-loyalists to get their way and for the Democratic Party to have a viable nominee. From there, yeah, you would need to have essentially everybody internally on board. This is crucial for a number of reasons, not the least of which being you actually can't reliably invoke the 25th Amendment. You can't, right? And I'll explain why in a second. But among other things, uh, people have not really been examining this because they don't know. Like people like to just like throw things out and like not understand how process is done. Like these are all process concerns. One of the reasons why I was talking about like process and how the process of picking a nominee is something that we've already passed. The ship has sailed on, but whatever. In terms of the primaries, the process of invoking the 25th is that a sort of infight, if it is an infight, happens within the party, which leads to an argument for the sitting president to be removed, even in spite of his own desire to stay, and then that gets sorted out. Where? Say it with me. Say it with me. The House, the legislative branch, and what's required? Come on, come on. Who's raising their hand? I know somebody's raising their hand in the audience. 2/3 majority, which requires, of course, the Republicans. Which means, right? And then this is like key writing and rhetorical techniques. I'm doing this for a reason. Which means, like, all these things are contingent. Which means, if the Democrats aren't completely in line, and if the 25th does need to be invoked, in spite of and against the president's wishes, all that will really happen in practice, is they'll just do an up-down vote in the houses of government on whether or not to replace Joe Biden with Kamala Harris as sitting president. Do you think, anybody here listening, do you think that the Republicans, or at least a significant significant minority, plurality of them, will join a significant minority, or this can't be minority, it has to be a significant plurality or majority of Democrats in supporting this? Do you think an up-down vote on replacing Joe Biden with Kamala Harris will win in the houses of government and legislative branch, with Democrats and Republicans together? Again, a group of people that can't agree on what to have for lunch, let alone big pieces of legislation, let alone significant appointments or replacements in government. I mean, they sort of ultimately kind of do, but it's often a fight, needlessly stupid and partisan fight. And then the incentive structures here, so we're going to replace a bad candidate with a better candidate, arguably, right? Which benefits the Democrats. Do you think the Republicans would want to do that? Oh, we're going to do something that might be seen as a mark of disloyalty by the elders of the party. Do you think that might have implications for the younger members of the party who support this kind of a move, regardless? Because there'll be people, if the 25th is invoked and it becomes a fight, there'll be people on both sides of it, on the Democratic side, also both sides on the Republican side. Like, it's a mess. So invoking the 25th is not clean, and it's not simple at all. This has to be a unified thing within the Democratic Party, and they all basically have to be in lockstep that, for reasons of medical emergency, again, that's how they would spin it. And this sounds conspiratorial, but again, I'm aware of optics and the necessity of certain, again, sort of professional wrestling style working and salesmanship of these things. It would be sold as, for reasons of medical emergency, the president can no longer serve his term. Vice President Kamala Harris is taking over, and in general, if there was enough coordination, this would work and would go over, and it would not require a vote in the houses of government, and that would be it. Okay. Do I think that's going to happen? Especially now, right now, based off of how things are looking and sounding, and how much there is, again, this backbiting and commentary in the press and back channels and everything else. No, I'm just gonna say it. No, I don't think that's likely. I don't think that's likely at all. I think it's possible. I think it's an open question. I think it's a live dog, but I don't think it's likely. I would not bet on it. And this is the only way forward to get Biden off the ticket and out of the presidency. And again, those things are inextricably linked at this point, in a way that they wouldn't have been if he had decided to pull an LBJ and say that I won't finish out my term and Kamala Harris is your nominee, and I hope she wins the primaries. And he said this back in start of this year. If that had happened, that'd be a different story. But we're not there anymore. We're really at an emergency pull the ripcord mechanistic alternative. And again, I don't fucking like that. I'll just say again, I don't like that. I'd much rather he lose. I'd much rather Trump lose too. But I'd rather Democrats get the spanking they deserve for deciding that they were gonna just be like, well, sure, he's old, but we don't care. Okay. Until they couldn't. Okay. But that's kind of like the majority of what I wanted to get to. It's like, 33 minutes in. If you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, please, put them on the video itself. Please like and subscribe. Blah, blah. Hit me up on Twitter, because that is where I live, aka X. Same name. Name's the same. I claim to fame at Quinn. But yeah, I don't think this is likely, and I don't even know if this is, let's say, I know for a fact in terms of like the lies that are going to be involved in it, it's technically not ethical. But I don't know if it's ethical just in terms of like, hey, should we just ignore the actual way that we're supposed to do this, that is the primary process, and instead utilize a mechanistic back channel alternative? No, you shouldn't, right? And you should get the spanking you deserve for not doing that. But again, good the party, good the country, a president who's not old as fuck, having a president who's not old as fuck. I can't lie and say it wouldn't be, in general, like the lesser of all the bad options for Kamala Harris to become sitting president and Democratic top-of-ticket nominee and even, win the presidency. And whatever your thoughts on Kamala Harris, okay? This is not even a comment on her, except the fact that she is like significantly younger and can put together sentences and etc. And we could disagree on that to some extent. I think it's just a descriptive fact that she's younger, obviously. And I would say also a descriptive fact that she, whatever your thoughts on her public speaking abilities, she can speak in public, right? You don't have to like what she says. You don't have to think that it always makes sense. You can even acknowledge that it is cringe. But she is a public speaker. She would be miles and ahead better than Joe Biden in that regard. She could do a dozen interviews this week, whereas Joe Biden, notably, famously, does not do interviews for the most part. So he does not like to do uncontrolled public engagement, public speeches, debates, etc. She could do all that. She might not always be super successful on it, but she would be miles ahead of Joe Biden. Okay. But yeah, like, I think it'd be better for the good of the country if that happened. Do I think that will happen? No. But that is one way forward. The alternative is just stay the course. Biden gets certified at the convention. They go to the general. I would say at this point, it seems more likely than not that they lose. And again, I would say they deserve to. And whatever happens from there. Not saying I want that to happen in terms of like I want Donald Trump to be reelected to a second term, non-consecutive second term. Just saying, like, realistically, that does seem to be a real, possibility as well. Live dog. You know what I want for president? I'll end on this. I want fucking Chase Oliver as president, man. That's what I want as president, right? Again, somebody who's not old as fuck and somebody who seems to be like a decent human being and has good policy. Whatever your thoughts on like the Libertarian Party and on him in particular, like I think if you just compare like apples to apples on a lot of their policy positions, Chase versus the other two guys, and yes, versus RFK, the fucking like dumbass darling of the dissident third party. I'm gonna be like completely like flippant and dismissive. I'm sorry. It's like the dissident, third party, whatever you want to call it, vibes based dissenting, whatever minority, who say on one level, yeah, I want a principled good man to be the president and the candidates and et cetera, and oh yeah, I'm gonna pick a possible like sex criminal who's also been an anti-vax like huckster and AIDS denier and conspiracy theorist who's said horrible things about his own family and the truth of how his own father lost his life and might have also eaten a dog. I don't know. The dog thing honestly just like doesn't matter to me. But just throwing it out there, just like might as well have that on top. Yeah, that's the good man that people want instead of Biden or Trump. Sure, whatever. But like realistically, I just want somebody who's younger than 70. I want somebody who's got decent policy. I want somebody who can steward this country. And anybody who doesn't want that deserves to get spanked at the polls, spanked at the polls and spanked at the voting box. And that seems to be what's going to happen. But again, who knows? We shall see. Hit me up. Otherwise, we will call it for now. And as always, you can find me. Boop, 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 doop, doop, boop, boop. How do I close this puppy? And as always, you can find me on the internet.